Good afternoon. I'm Holland Schwartz with APCO International. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Cybersecurity, NG911 Best Practices and Case Studies, sponsored by Hamilton NG911. Before we get started, there are just a few housekeeping notes to go over. You have joined in listen-only mode. Our panelists will be answering questions after the presentation, so if you'd like to ask a question, please use the question box in the control panel located on the right side of your screen. We will try to get to as many questions as possible in the allotted time. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available online along with a copy of the presentation. Now I'm going to hand things over to Rob Leonard, Information Security Manager for Hamilton NG911, who will be leading this webinar. Take it away, Rob.
Thanks, Holland, and thank you all for joining. Good afternoon or good morning to you all from wherever you're joining us around the country today. We hope that this webinar finds you all well and that your families are doing well in kind of an unprecedented time in our country. But we're going to kind of put those things aside for about an hour and talk about cybersecurity and how that affects the NG911 industry and some of the best practices and case studies surrounding that. I would say to grab a pen and paper. We do have some interactive polling that'll happen throughout this to kind of get you engaged. And so there will be a website URL and a text message phone number that you're going to be able to sign up through so that you can engage in some of this interactive polling that we have integrated with the presentation. So a lot of good information. We've got an hour to do it. I want to leave some questions, time for questions at the end. So let's get started. So as Holland said, my name is Robert Leonard. I've been in the industry over 20 years, 15 of that with Hamilton Telecommunications and Hamilton NG911. I'm a former Army Cavalry Scout, and I've really lent my expertise over the last couple of years specifically to local, state, and federal entities who are really looking to mold security standards for telecommunication companies and the NG911 industry. And now a little bit about Hamilton NG911 quickly. We provide a lot of the services that I'm sure that you're familiar with, but we really have a robust infrastructure and we have experience in mission critical IT service and support. A lot of the times you'll find one company that does NG911 core services or maybe real-time text, and then another firm might provide the cybersecurity that goes around those solutions. And Hamilton NG911 is a little bit unique in that fact where not only do we provide all the things listed here from core services, real-time text, but we also provide the cybersecurity that goes around those offerings as well. So we're a little bit unique in the space as we're more of a hybrid solution where we provide all of the services, including the cybersecurity that goes around those as well. So quick instructions on the opt-in for interactive polling questions. Simply send a text to Hamilton NG911 to 22333. Or you're already in your browser with the webinar, you can go to poll.ev/Hamilton NG911 to participate in that polling. All the voting remains anonymous, so please feel free to interact with the polling, and it really gives us a gauge of where people are at. It kind of helps me to tailor this webinar to focus on some of the areas specific to the answers. So it's a very good way to make sure that we're hitting all of the things that people are really interested in about. So quick overview, what we'll be talking about before we get into the meat of this. We're going to talk about challenges and opportunities facing the NG911 and PSAP specifically. I'll throw a couple case studies at you to show you kind of what's going on, what the environment is around the country. We'll talk about the village mentality and how to build your security network using that mentality. We'll talk about how 24/7, 365 monitoring helps, what it looks like, and what the roadmap looks like to getting to that type of a monitoring system. And then we're also going to talk about how do you mature your security posture once you get that foundation laid. It's very important to not rest on your laurels or to be complacent once you feel like you're getting a little more comfortable with your security posture. And we'll talk about that and what some of the next steps are. All right, let's get into it. So this is a cartoon that my son sent to me. He's 17, and he graduates this year. And he said, "Dad, you know, look at this big guy. You know, he looks. It reminds me of you when you were in Afghanistan. But then you got this other guy back here who looks like you when you're stateside, right?" So, and it's kind of hard to ground kids nowadays when they get a little sparky with you about that with the whole coronavirus thing. But I kind of joked a little bit that if that wasn't in place, he might be grounded a little bit because that cybersecurity guy looks a little bit out of shape, but that's probably accurate. So, but really this represents warfare, right? And we think about warfare like this big guy and being on the battlefield and being, you know, in a foreign land and all these different things that you associate with war. But really what we're up against nowadays, folks, is more of what this guy with the glasses and the laptop and his feet up on his desk, that's really becoming where the warfare lives. You hear about all these different state actors and, you know, who infiltrate or do certain things, whether it's messing with an election or bringing down public safety or DDoS attacks or, you know, all these myriad of things that we hear. It really shifts what warfare and what a soldier looks like, okay? And so really what we've got is this guy back here saying, "Yo, dude, back here," right? And that's a really good representation of what we're looking at from a cyber warfare disposition, okay? And so I just thought that was interesting, and it shows kind of the contrast between warfare as it's understood from, you know, years and years past, and warfare from a cyber security standpoint, and the difference in the people that mitigate those risks. So, all right, so our first polling question: how confident do you feel about your current security plan? You know, we'll just give a couple minutes, maybe not that long, but a little bit of time for people to answer their question. And please, again, this all stays anonymous, so feel free to answer honestly so that we can tailor the, you know, the coming slides and some of the narrative to what you're seeing. So looks like we got somewhat confident, which is good. So let's start. This might change a little bit as we go through it, but 14% say they're very confident, which is great. For those people who are very confident, I would suggest to make sure that you don't get complacent, okay? Always be thinking about what are the next steps to build on the security posture that you feel very confident about, right? If you're very confident, you know that you're never done with cybersecurity, right? It's always building on top of a foundation, on top of a foundation, on top of a foundation, okay? So make sure you mature your cybersecurity plan with the help of maybe an analyst or a cybersecurity professional that can take you to the next steps. Somewhat confident, that's really kind of a healthier place to be, because somewhat confident shows that you've got things in place, but your overall mentality isn't one of overconfidence, right? Because we all know that once you start getting overconfident, you tend to get lulled into this false sense of security. So you want to stay somewhere in the somewhat confident range, because not only does that keep you sharp and make you, if you're somewhat confident, you know you have room for growth, right? And that's healthy, especially in cybersecurity. Non-confident, 23%, you know, this is where we would say, talk to a professional. You know, I think all of these across here, you should talk to a professional at some point, because then you get a roadmap of what your next steps are. And if you're not confident, what this tells me is that you need to talk to somebody who can help you get a roadmap in place, but you've also got things already in place yourself, okay? So it isn't that you're not started, it's that you are started, but maybe you're not as confident with what you've put into place, okay? But at least you're started, okay? There's a lot of people out there that have paralysis by overanalysis. How do I start? How do I eat the elephant, right? It looks like such a big thing. And in that particular instance, you'll want to definitely talk to a security professional. Spend a little money up front for a couple hours of consulting to get you a roadmap of which way you should go. And a lot of the time we find out that, especially when I do consulting, that people just need to have tasks laid out. They just need to know where to go, what to do, how to do it, when to call somebody. And a consultant can help you do that and really get you going in the right direction. 62% somewhat confident. That's great. That's a healthy poll. Continue to do what you can do and do business impact analysis, or have your cybersecurity professional show you how to do one, or do the first one with you. And that way you can build on that confidence. And the 63% is great. That's considerably higher than some of the percentages that we've done in the recent past. So that's great. That's a great poll. So in this next area, we're going to go through the security challenges. Okay, this is just a list of some of the topics that we're going to hit on. So we know PSAPs are a target for bragging rights, the interoperability challenges, some of the lack of standards, how moving to an IP-based system, what that looks like, and how that makes us more vulnerable. And then we're going to speak a little bit about the lack of in-house security professionals and some of the budget constraints that come around that. All right, so PSAPs are targets. There's no doubt about that. You get these people, these bad actors that want to brag, right? They want to go onto Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and they want to say, hey, I brought down this particular thing, right? And what better way to get some street cred than to bring down something that everybody needs, wants, and requires in order to be safe, right? Which obviously is the 911 system. You bring down the 911 system, ears perk up, people sit up in their seats, and the response is fast and furious. And that's what these people want. Okay, this is we go back into the day where viruses were the big deal, right? Where a virus would come in and it would do whatever it did, whether it mined information, whether it brought down a network, or whatever. Right now, what we're seeing these younger kids, quite frankly, bringing down these high-value targets, or HVTs, and they brag about it, okay? So what that tells us is that we have an increased need for IDS, or intrusion detection systems. Now, it's important to note that the IDS isn't going to fix anything, okay? It's going to alert a specific individual or a group of people that something's going on. Maybe there's a peak in incoming traffic from a certain port, or from the web, or whatever it is, and you set those thresholds. But the IDS system will let you know before the attack itself is realized. So if you're looking at like I have in that last bullet point there, already have seen examples of a 12-state TDOS attack, right? So what happens in that particular case, we had this kid, he wrote an Apple app, put it out in the Apple store. People downloaded it under false pretenses, thinking it was something else. And what it did is that app just called 911 over and over and over and over again until it dropped. It brought the 911 network to its knees. So what would have happened there is that IDS system would have seen that increased traffic would have notified either the security professional or the point of contact when it comes to network operations and said, hey, something's happening here, okay? Now, you can spend a considerable more money on an IPS, which is an intrusion prevention system, which is, it includes everything from an IDS, but it also has parameters and actual action items based on what you see. So if you see increased traffic coming in from the web on a particular port, and that port's not one that's known for network operation, and it starts to spike, the IPS can simply turn that port off, okay? And so you can see how powerful that can be, but with that power comes a pretty big price tag, right? So in most of the consulting I've done, an IDS does the trick, okay? It makes sure that anything that's happening that's anomalous on the network can notify somebody so that they can do some type of action to make sure that the network itself isn't compromised or isn't brought down, or there isn't a degradation in productivity because of some type of outside threat, okay? So with that being said, the best thing that we can do from a remediation standpoint is to train our people. What's a phishing attack? What's social engineering? What's baiting, right? We have to get into our people's minds more of a security mindset. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but think about Facebook and think about some of the lists of questions that, you know, let's get to know each other. Ask these or answer these 25 questions so that your friends can know something about you that you didn't know, right? Folks, that's social engineering. And that's on the web for anybody to see. You know, what's your favorite color? Blue. What's your favorite food? Chinese. What's your mother's maiden name? Wait a second, what? Those are questions that I get asked when I try and authenticate with my banking account, right? But it seems so frivolous. Seems like something just fun to do, something pass the time, right? We have to train our people that that's social engineering and that there are risks associated with that. So some case studies, right? We know PSAPs are a target. Here's some case studies. 70 plus state and local governments hit with ransomware, right? Last year, 70 governments. You know, we have this mindset that governments are a little bit more secure and are generally better positioned to put certain things in place to make sure that they're not hit. But folks, they're getting hit. We're getting hit, okay? And so the best thing to do is to take some of these case studies and study them a little bit and see what happened and how you can put things in place to make sure that you don't realize some of the same things. 2/3 of all known 2019 ransomware attacks in U.S. targeted government, okay? So 2/3 of all ransomware attacks hit government entities. That's a huge number. Nearly 400 cyber attacks in 2 years against U.S. public safety agencies and local government. Folks, that's not just 911. That's sheriff, that's state police, that's local police, police stations. We'll talk a little bit down here, a little lower about what that looks like, but everybody knew about Baltimore, right? We heard about it, ransomware attack on the city computers, $18.2 million lost or delayed revenue and direct restoration costs. And for you, those of you that are in the know with Baltimore, you know, they waited a little bit because they were trying not to pay the ransom and they were trying to do certain things. Well, folks, these are criminals, okay? Most of the time, you pay the ransom, you don't get the key, you don't get your data back because these aren't nice people, okay? But now what we're seeing is we're seeing a shift in that. People understand that they're not nice people, and they understand the majority of the data isn't recovered. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing these ransomware attackers provide a resume, right? A resume to the people that they're attacking saying, look, we attacked these 4 companies. We requested X amount of dollars. They paid it, and we gave them the key, right? They're trying to build credibility in themselves of why you should pay the ransom, because we did, we gave the data back for these other 4 companies, so you should trust us and you should pay it, okay? Now, if something like this happens, you want to have your security professional on the line before you make any decisions, okay? Sometimes paying the ransom will get your data back, but it also tells the attacker that, hey, they're willing to pay the ransom. So what does that say, right? You're probably a good person to hit again, but that's something that you should discuss with your security professional. Jefferson, Georgia, in March 2019, they had a ransomware attack. Okay, the 911 dispatch computers went dark. That's unacceptable. We understand that the impact that would have in public safety. But not only that, right? Okay, jail cells could no longer be opened remotely. Okay, what if you lost power to the jail, right? Well, I mean, you have to have some redundancy within those jail cells in order to let people out, right? Okay, so this isn't targeting just 911 dispatch. I mean, we're talking jail cells. Look at the bottom bullet. Sheriff's deputies lost use of laptops and license plate database access. What? No, I mean, that is a clear and present danger to public safety. Okay, and those case studies are pretty big. I mean, those are pretty impressive stats and the effect that those attacks had on public safety. We're going to talk, it's not all doom and gloom, folks. We're going to talk about how to fix stuff like this and to be proactive about making sure that your PSAP or your jail or whatever other government entity doesn't end up as one of these case studies. So common network threats, we've heard about viruses. We don't hear about viruses a whole lot anymore. They're still out there, but ransomware has really become the big one because it's monetary in nature. And not only do you get bragging rights for doing what you did, but you also get paid. Okay. DDoS attack. I want to talk about that just real quickly because DDoS gets thrown around quite a bit. There's such thing as a DOS attack or DOS. The difference is simply the number of computers. Okay, so in a DOS attack, you've got one computer trying to flood another computer, most of the time a server, trying to flood it with information so that it just can't process and it just stops working. Okay, so that's one computer trying to do that to a server. If you've got multiple machines that are hitting one server, obviously that's going to be a more effective attack because you have more information coming from more services that are focused on one entity or server, okay? And that's a distributed denial of service, okay? So I want people to understand I get that question a lot, what's the difference? I hear it a lot, but what does it do, okay? Basically, it floods a network or a server with too much information in it, and it makes the server stop working. When it comes from multiple machines and is affecting one server or one entity, it's a DDoS or a distributed denial of service. Phishing emails, wow. What more do you say about that? Phishing emails they're rampant. And the best way to take care of those is to train our people. You can have some mail filtering things in place as well that can help with that. But they're going to get through, folks. They're going to get through. Anybody that's a network administrator or an IT professional, we spend a lot of time making sure phishing emails don't make it to the inbox. But because of the sheer amount of them, there are some that are going to get through. And then probably the biggest threat to our networks are our users, me included. If I click on an email that is a phishing email, I really introduced something terrible to the network. And so if we train our users, we can bring that risk down. but there's always going to be some residual risk in any of these, actually. But end users really are the place that we can benefit the most with training and bringing them into the security mindset and methodology, and make end users actually part of the security team. You can really find some benefit in looping them in. So we talked about expanding the attack surface in the introduction, and with the IP-based system, you're now exposing all of these networks that were, as I do the rabbit ears with my fingers, isolated in the legacy networks in the past. We're moving to an environment where IP, or Internet Protocol, the way that computers talk across the internet, okay, based system. Okay, and so when you do that, you have to put in put in additional controls to mitigate the risk that being on the internet brings to you. So, of course, antivirus, patch management, backups, your real-time monitoring. You want to know what's going on with your network in real time. It is so important to make sure that you are seeing things as they happen, not after they happened, okay? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later in the presentation, but there's some really cost-effective ways to monitoring your network to make sure that you're, one, getting to things before it's a reactive response, but it also gives you the ability to put certain thresholds in place to kind of maintain the network in a proactive manner. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later because it's very important. And then dedicated security staff. We have to ask ourselves, what's the fiscally responsible answer? Because we all know we have budgets, right? And in government space, that's even more relevant. So partnering with someone may be the answer. And we're going to talk about that partnership as well later in the webinar, and kind of give you some guidance as to what that partnership, because it really is a partnership, what that should look like, okay? All right, we got ourselves another polling question. So what do you think is the biggest threat to an NG911 system? We'll see here. I might have gave it away a little bit earlier in the webinar, but that's okay. As long as we learn it. All right. So we'll give a couple more seconds here, but looks like overwhelmingly our own people, and that's absolutely right. That is absolutely right. Hackers, let's start with hackers. Hackers are lazy, folks, okay? You get a couple controls in place that secures the perimeter of your network. What they're going to do is they're going to hit up against your firewall, and they're going to try and do some of the things that they do, and they're going to see that you have just basic best practices controls in place, and they're going to go, oh my gosh, there's so much easier prey out there than somebody who already has these basic controls on their firewall, and they'll move on. They'll go to the low-hanging fruit, and that doesn't include people who actually work and maintain their firewall and their network perimeter. Because hackers think, well, if I get past these controls, am I going to find more controls on the inside? Chances are they will, right? So they're not going to deal with you. They're going to move along, okay? We're going to skip over our own people for a moment. Denial of service attacks, again, you can remediate that with an IDS or an IPS, okay? So even though that they are destructive and they can bring down networks, they are able to be remediated relatively easily with an IDS or IPS solution. And then circuit disruption, right? We automatically think we're on the phone. What happens if our circuit gets cut because the backhoe, cut the lines? You should have circuit redundancy in place already, okay? And so circuit disruption really shouldn't be an issue. If you have one single point of failure for your circuits, which means that you only have one trunk coming in. You might want to talk to your security professional and get kind of an idea of what is the best way to make that redundant. So our own people, 80%. I'm glad to see this, because a lot of the time, especially over the course of the last couple of years, we saw a lot more of a percentage of answers being on hackers. And what we're seeing now is that when people start to realize that our own people are our own worst enemy, and they take that information and they understand that it's not a direct reflection on a person's character, we can really start remediating the biggest risk to our network. Folks, we're all holed up in our houses, right? We're ordering stuff on Amazon and all these, Grubhub and all these things, where if you get an email that says your order has been canceled, it's more relevant now than ever, right? Because we're ordering more online than ever, and we're having things delivered more than ever. So when you see that email, your instinct is to click on it. Which one of my 20 Amazon orders is delayed, right? And it's kind of sad because it's really kind of the reality right now, but you're more apt to click on it because you're in a more of a stressful situation, right? You want to test under stress. Hackers, bad actors, all these people that are trying to get into your systems love times like these because people are more apt to click, okay? If we know that, we can train our people. Hey, mouse over the link. If it came from Amazon and it's trying to tell you to put in your credentials and it says click here to do that, which they will never do, mouse over the link. And if it goes to http://h347662@123.com, that is not a legitimate email. And so just that little snippet that you can tell your people how to mouse over a link before they click on it remediates so much risk, and you didn't spend any money, right? That's what we want to do, right? We want to heighten our security at the most cost-effective way possible. And training our people is how we do that, okay? Whether it's annually, twice a year, as things happen, whatever it is, constantly be molding your people to think about the things that they do on the network and how it affects the network as a whole. This is the best place you can implement controls for the least amount of money that'll have the biggest impact. Okay, I love those questions. Thanks for answering those and participating. It really helps to guide where we're going here. So, all right, so lacking in-house security professionals, usually that's because of the lack of funding. Security people are not cheap, but they do save you an extensive amount of money in the long run. But you have to stretch the money that is available. So partner with someone to either provide it all or consult with someone to get you moving in the right direction, or a hybrid of the two, right? Your partnership with your security professional should not be one-sided. I have people that call me and they ask me a quick question and they say, Rob, I'm struggling a little bit with this. I say, hey, do 1, 2, 3. They say, okay. And we hang up, and you know what? They don't get a bill. Okay. That's a partnership. Okay. I don't hammer my clients with invoices. I want them to be secure. And if that means calling your security professional and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Or I'm trying to do that. And they give you that insight and they move you down the road to a more secure network without hammering you with an invoice every time, that's a real partnership, and that's what you should look for. Accountability and expectations. Duties have to be assigned in the PSAP or to your security partner, okay? It's kind of like telling your kid, hey, go be successful. Well, Dad, what does successful mean? What does that look like to you? what's the bar, right? Make sure to set those expectations and the bar for success so that your security partner, your internal staff can exceed the standard. It's very difficult to reach success if you don't know where success is, okay, or what that looks like. Now, delegate, but spot check. Trust but verify, right? We hear that a lot. Trust but verify. Trust your people are doing the right thing, but spot check them in the background. If they're not, show them what they did incorrectly, do remedial training, and work together to hit that common goal of a more secure network. Make sure to trust and verify. And again, expectations must be clear and concise. There's nothing worse than trying to be successful when you don't know for sure what things you have to hit or exceed in order to be successful. So make sure that your people know what that looks like. Interoperability, you know, this is always a big deal. Anytime you have town, state, federal, local government, you know, there's going to be some headbutting. You know, people get territorial. That's understandable. But this must work. It has to work from town to town, state to state, and nationwide. It just has to be. We're going to talk about how you can participate in that in this next bullet here with be a contributor. I mean, if there's something that you want to see and you want it to be a certain way, make it known. Okay? Make PSAP's wants and needs known. It's kind of like setting expectations again. How can federal, state, and local government meet your needs if you don't do something to make those needs known? APCO is a great group to join for working groups to help mold those standards. Make sure that if you want something, you join some of these working groups and make your voice known so that they can be included as we move forward as an industry. So state and federal guidelines and standards, again, like I said, give your recommendations for those. You guys are the experts, right? I can't go into a PSAP and say, this is how I think 911 should work, because that's not my field. Now I can tell you how to make sure that the network that the PSAP is running on remains up, right? I can tell you what new threats are in the space that might impact that particular sector, but I'm not going to be able to be the one that says, in order for 911 to be as efficient as possible, you have to do X, Y, and Z. No, that's you guys. And so you have to be able to make those, again, make those needs known. And your partner should help, your security partner should help you in that aspect. I would be very surprised if you were on, let's say, an APCO working group and your security professional wasn't, okay? So be on the lookout for that. Your security partner should guide you through the steps that you need to do in order to secure your network, but a good partner will be right there next to you. How did that work out yesterday, Jim? You told me that you were going to try this. How did that work out, right? Or maybe you're on the same working group together, okay? All those things a partner should do for you. All right, looks like our last polling question. What are decision makers' biggest concerns about cybersecurity planning? Let some of these come in a little bit. Looks like employee training and threat prioritization are kind of leading the pack right now. All right, so we're going to start a little bit as these start to come in. So employee training, we've touched on that. Now, it is a big concern, right? It's our number one threat. It's the number one threat to our networks. But it's easily remediated with continued, and I stress the word continued, training of our people, whether that's a post on your intranet site, whether that's a blast email. You know, I'm working on an article to put on our intranet site right now that really kind of lays out what phishing email looks like and what that can do to the network, because I think a lot of the times that people think, oh, I'm just one person. Well, one person can have a huge impact on a network that services you know, hundreds, thousands, millions of people, right? And so I'm trying to get that across to our people that hovering over a link may keep the network up. And that might sound sensationalistic, but it's really true. Security plan road mapping. Yeah, this is a big deal too. Maybe not a big deal as some of these other ones that we're going to talk about, especially employee training. But security plan road mapping really gets you on the correct path. And this is more for probably those entities that have maybe done some cybersecurity control implementation. And this is a really good way to start the maturation of your security plan, okay? And you should work with your security professional to help you get that road mapping in place. And folks, a good partner is going to give you the plan to success, right? They're going to get a couple hours, you're going to spend a couple hours of road mapping consulting fees, and then they're going to hand you this roadmap, and it's going to have everything you need to do to mature your security plan. And then you should be able to call that partner and say, hey, I don't really understand this point, or I really like this, but I think we need to change it, right? It's got to be a collaborative effort. 35% getting started. That's actually a lower percentage than I was expecting. In especially the last year, getting started has been the overwhelming concern about on decision makers' minds about how to get started, how to eat the elephant, right? And the answer is to take a bite. Even if you just start with employee training, make up a PowerPoint, make up a PowerPoint that shows people what a phishing email looks like. But do something, right? That paralysis by overanalysis only takes away from the time that you could be securing your network. Your security professional will get you started. Definitely start with consulting with a security professional to get that squared away, get you headed in the right direction, and then you can start doing your security plan road mapping to kind of build upon that. And then threat prioritization, that's great. That's another area that a security professional should do for you at relatively low cost. Threat prioritization tells me that you've already written down what you're afraid of, right? And you just don't know in what order to remediate them, right? So just a quick one, we'll move on, we're kind of running out of time. The best way to remediate or to lessen the worry about threat prioritization is to just prioritize them based on the biggest impact they can have to your entity, okay? If A would bring the whole network down and B is something less than that, right, then we know that the threat prioritization is going to be AB, okay? So take those things, and even if you think you put some type of gauge to it, whether it's money, reputation, whatever it is, and put how much impact that would have next to each threat, and then just sort them by the biggest number. Okay? Awesome. Great poll question. So it's not all doom and gloom. There are some opportunities. We're going to talk about what the monitoring looks like. We've kind of talked considerably about employee training, building a plan from scratch versus revamping. Ask for what you want instead of being told what you need, and building your security community. So, monitoring, right? You can put into 365, 24/7, 365 monitoring thresholds for memory, right? Remember blue screens, right? How often do we see blue screens nowadays? Okay, it's very minimal. The reason for that in a lot of networks is because they have monitoring thresholds set up for memory and CPU usage. So back in the day, you'd be using a web browser and you'd have 43 tabs open, and your computer would start running slow, and all of a sudden, boop, blue screen, right? Well, what happens nowadays is that the monitoring looks for things like that, And you can tell the monitoring, hey, if my memory hits at 90%, kill whatever process is using the most, okay? So what happens in that previous scenario is that Internet Explorer or Firefox or whatever browser you're using crashes, right? It goes away and you go, oh my gosh, what happened to my browser? I don't know, you know? And so you launch your browser again and you go back off. Well, what happened is that the monitoring software made sure that the only thing affected was the browser and not your computer, because we all know, we've all been there, when your computer blue screens, what happens? You lose all your non-saved information. And if you're like me, I'm working in spreadsheets, PowerPoints, Word documents, browsers, all these different things, and I don't save as often as I probably should. So what that does is that keeps your network up, it keeps the computer up, and really just kills the thing that's causing your computer to run slow, okay? And you can set everything. I mean, folks, you can set it for anything. We can tell you when your yellow ink is running low in one of your printers. And we call you and say, hey, Joe, I see that yellow's running out on your mailroom printer. You want me to get some of that ordered for you, okay? That's what it should look like. It's totally proactive, right? It's the ability to receive an email, text message, notification that something is about to happen, or something doesn't look fishy, or something looks fishy and that it needs to be taken care of, but it's no longer reactive, right? We're already ahead of something that's that could have an impact on our network. Again, employee training, arguably the best control against attacks, but it also builds rapport amongst your employees. It makes people feel like they're part of the effort, part of the team, right? But it also brings to the forefront a security culture. It makes people think a little bit more security-like, okay, when it's necessary, because people are our biggest risk, okay? And then it reduces the cost by proactively eliminating threats. You don't have to protect yourself or come back from a ransomware attack if you didn't realize the ransomware attack in the first place, okay? Just kind of goes without saying. So anybody that's built a house knows it's easier to build a new house than it is to add on to a house, right? And that's kind of what this is. Building your plan from scratch versus revamping. It means you get exactly what you want. You're not missing anything in the transition from one plan to another. You get to be involved and understand the plan from the very beginning. It's considerably easier to make adjustments on the fly because you're not having to retroactively go back and update one of the legacy plan. The security partner can give you clear and concise guidance, and you'll conform to emerging industry standards. You won't have to go back and again fix an existing plan. You're already in the process, and you're building it from scratch, and so you can include those as they emerge. And then it takes a village, folks. Join some of these groups. What happens if you join these groups? They send you alerts. You talk different methodologies. They help you to stay sharp, right? CISRIC, ComISAC, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense. Go to their websites. You can get alerts of existing and emerging threats. But it does help keep you sharp. And then become a contributor, okay? Explain what your needs are and help to mold the security plan to meet the expectations of the PSAP, okay? Contribute to that. If you see something, say something, because it might need to be included in the plan. But make sure that you have that village mentality, because I can't do it all by myself. I have to have information coming in from multiple points in order to be an effective security professional. And then choosing the right partner. Partner with a company that is collaborative in nature. I can't express this enough. Don't get billed for every single question. If you do, you might want to reevaluate who you're with. You really want a partner This isn't something that you should feel alone about or that you feel like you're getting nickeled and dimed, okay? Make sure that you're partnering with someone who makes you feel warm and fuzzy and contributes to the effort just as much as you are. So next steps. So look to expand the areas that have the biggest impact. We talked about that. Get some employee training going, okay? And then ongoing education for your staff. Conferences and networking for in-house IT. I go to a ton of these because it's so informative and it really keeps me on the cutting edge of some of the threats that are out there. Get your employees involved for open discussions, and then hire a consultant for the roadmap development, which we talked about in that last poll question. You can spend a lot of time spinning your wheels. It's really worth the money for a couple hours of consulting for a very clear and concise way to go. And so, you know, up with employee training, get that initial consult for roadmap development. And then share what you've learned, right? Webinars like this are great. I'm really looking forward to your questions. Participate. Promote open discussions within that security community, right? So if you join a group, talk. Say, hey, I don't quite understand this, or this is something that I did. People will benefit, you included. It helps to keep you sharp, and we talked about that a little bit. It's very important. It helps to remediate complacency, which is really, really a bad thing in security. And then it builds your security networking community. It really brings together all of the industry leaders and some really great minds that will help to build your methodology of risk remediation. So I know that was kind of fast and furious, folks. I look like I left about 10 minutes for questions. Before we get into those, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and hopefully, you know, something in this webinar was beneficial to you that you can go back and implement. And we really want to thank APCO for making it possible. So I guess I'll turn it over to some questions.
Thanks a lot, Rob. This is Mitch. I'm with the Hamilton NG911 team, and I've been helping curate this webinar. Rob, I think a good question that would get everything started here is coming back to the employee training. Can you kind of talk about maybe the best way to get that started if that hasn't really been something that's been a big focus in an operation yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did is we started employee training years and years ago, and what we ran up against was buy-in. You know, people didn't want to take a test. They're busy. They're trying to make us money and stuff, you know, and my thinking was I got to associate this employee training with something positive, right? And so what I did after the first year of seeing this not buy-in, what I did is I took the employee training, which you can do it a myriad of different ways. You can make your own PowerPoint and a test. There's websites like ClassMarker where you can build your PowerPoint, put it out there. It generates, you make a test, it generates a link that you can then put on your internal website, or you can disperse via email for people to take. But what I found is that I had to associate it with something positive. So the next year, what I did is I had employee training at the same time we had our yearly performance reviews, okay? And what that did is it told the employee, hey, before you can have your review and get your raise, right, the positive influence and the positive association, you need to take security training, okay? And so that, you know, you heard it grumble. They took the security training. Everybody took it, obviously, because they wanted their review and they wanted their raise. And what we found out, unbeknownst to me that this was going to be a factor, is that the next year, people were excited to hear about the security training. Hey, security's training out. And why? Because they had associated it with getting more money. It wasn't something now that took time out of their day, and it wasn't something that, oh my gosh, the security guys got a silly test again for me. It was, I need to understand this information. I need to pass the test so I can get my raise. Okay, so that's some really good out of the box thinking that got us to where we wanted to be, but also had some benefits that we weren't necessarily expecting to happen, which was really kind of folding everybody in and making them part of the team, and it really shot our security culture through the roof. So with that in mind, make sure you're putting your security training with something that makes people feel good. They're more apt to take it, they're more apt to buy in, and they're more apt to really retain the information that you're really trying to get across.
That's great, Rob. Thank you. We've got another question here. Looks like the question is, how important is it to have an outside agency review your setup or attempt to access?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's very important because a lot of the times what we do, me included, is you believe you're on the right path, right? And your head's down and you're killing it, right? And what you don't understand is that maybe because you're so far inside the box, you didn't see something else, right? Right now, I'm being audited, okay? Every 3 years, I have an outside third-party agency come in and tell me what I'm doing well, right, and then also, more importantly, tell me what I'm doing wrong, you know? And again, this isn't a hit on my character. This is simply information that I need in order to make sure that what I think is happening is really happening, okay? And so with this particular question, you could be busting your backside and feel really, really good about what you're doing, but it's important that you verify, right? I trust my work, but I have to verify my work. I trust my direct reports' work, but I have to verify their work, okay? And that includes us, right? I can go and do what I think is the best thing and feel good about it, but I need an extra set of eyes to come in and say, yep, I verify that the way you feel is correct. Or, hey, you're doing a good job here, but have you thought about this? Because, again, maybe you're just so far in it, it's one of those things that you miss. So I absolutely recommend, and I do myself every 3 to 4 years, a full-blown audit of what I'm doing in our network to make sure that I'm verifying that what I'm feeling good about is actually reality.
Great stuff, Rob.
Great
Quick
question.
follow-up on that.
Great question.
Would you recommend that the 3 to 4 year frequency threshold is maybe a good starting point for emergency services, or would you say that needs to be more frequent, or would you need to have more information on that?
Yeah, I think that if you're first starting out, you should be able to probably do that maybe a little more frequently, depending on how what funds are available, because those really they're pretty expensive. They're necessary. I mean, they pay for themselves time and time again. But if you're just getting started, it might make more sense to do it a little more frequently. 3 years for a full-blown audit is I don't know. I think a mature network could go a little longer. An immature network would probably go a little bit shorter, but your security professional should get you on the right path and to remediating risk and stuff pretty quickly. And then once you have those things in place, you could probably have a more frequent, lower scale audit. Just because we have a full-blown audit every 3 years doesn't mean I don't do something annually and biannually. I have another firm totally separate from the one that's doing the audit now come in and do a yearly penetration test just to test and verify our third-party audit. So yeah, depending on the landscape and really the risk appetite for the entity, it could go to the left or to the right, depending on that landscape.
Awesome. I think that that covers most of the questions we've got and takes us up to time.
Okay. Well, again, folks, thank you so much for joining today. Like I said, I really hope that this gives you at least some guidance into areas that you can work on and put controls in place to, to really secure your network in a cost-effective manner. Again, this is going to be recorded, and my contact information is on here too. So please feel free to email me if you need any more guidance. And thanks again, all.
All right, we have to wrap up now. Thank you to our speaker, Rob, as well as our sponsor, Hamilton NG911. You will receive an email in the next few days with instructions on how to print your certificate and how to access the recording and slides from this webinar. Thank you again for joining us today. This concludes our webinar.